So in the category of xAPI HyperDrive participant, the topic xACTION, the bridge between xAPI and enterprise systems, won the best contribution. Our presenters, just make sure I'm looking at the right name. It's Art Werkenthin and Duncan Welder, ready to present for you now. Go ahead, gentlemen, and begin when you're ready.
All right, thanks, Karen. Let me go ahead and share the screen here.
Okay, I'm starting to see it come up now. We've got it. Go ahead.
Okay, good. So the xACTION is a project that we built for some customers. It's a bridge between xAPI and enterprise systems. Essentially, the need for this project came about because of some opportunities created in the pandemic to replace hands-on learning with VR. In particular, we work with a lot of highly regulated industries. The regulation agencies don't typically want to look through a learning record store in order to find what somebody completed. They just want to look at an LMS or run a report. So in the VR world, if we're going to do that training and we're disconnected, how can we record that and ultimately get it into the LMS in this particular example? So what we built was a system called xACTION, and it takes xAPI statements as inbound data. It then can match those statements up to rules in a pattern matching engine. So we're looking for specific pieces of an xAPI statement to be present. It could be a particular verb, it could be a particular object, it could be the success property set to true or completion set to true, or a score higher than a particular value. And once all of the patterns are matched for a particular trigger, we can fire outbound REST calls using REST APIs. So in the example I gave on the previous slide, we're looking for a series of statements coming in indicating that a person completed a hands-on activity that was actually done in VR. And once we get all of those statements in, we can make an outbound call, in this case, to the REST for the LMS and give the person credit for having completed that particular course or a particular curriculum. This will work with essentially any REST API, so you could call an online system and award a digital badge if 10 statements were received that matched patterns. You could give credit in a competency management system. You can essentially call an HR system and give credit for completing a curriculum or earning a degree. It's basically anything you can think of that you can determine has been met via xAPI statements. So the enterprise integration was where we started because we had a customer, again, that had online hands-on training, in this case fire extinguisher training. They needed to do it on a headset once the pandemic started, and then they wanted credit to show up in the LMS. So we end up calling the LMS's REST API to give credit. But again, it can work with virtually any REST API that you may need to call in an HR system or a badging system or Salesforce or Facebook, or anything that has a REST API can be called based on a series of statements that come in. Once we got that done, we realized we could do some other cool things. There's a concept of a noisy LRS and an authoritative LRS that the Department of Defense has been circulating. The noisy LRS gets all that good information that we want as L&D providers to tell us that the person did these particular activities in the content, they went on this particular path, and that's great, but the authoritative LRS may only care about the completion. So xACTION can also do statement forwarding. We get all the noisy statements, and then you tell us which ones you want to forward to an authoritative LRS, and they get fired going outbound. And then the last thing that we added to the system was the ability to transform statements. You might think of some of the tools out there that are generating xAPI statements that don't necessarily have a great vocabulary or a vocabulary that matches with what you have set as a standard in your organization for verbs and objects and activity types and so on. So xACTION has the ability to take statements in and then take pieces of those statements and send statements back out. It could grab the actor, or it could give an anonymous actor. It could grab the verb from an incoming statement, or it could translate the verb into a new verb which matches your vocabulary. And the same with objects and activity types. And all of the components of the statements can be created as entirely new statements going back out to the originating LRS or a completely different LRS. And that is basically it. That's our project.